And you feel like the politicians have just got the fingers in their ears going, la, 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 not listening, we're just carrying on as we are. Same old, same old. Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. It is 10:08. Andrew and Bev with you until midday.
Now, a new poll, it doesn't surprise either Bev or I, shows that most Brits believe that Britain is in decline. 76% of us, though, did surprise. We fear political unrest and even violence.
And those fears come amid violent riots, of course, in Ballymena in Northern Ireland. They've left dozens of police officers injured and the area largely destroyed in some cases, particularly the local leisure centre.
Let's talk to our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Doogie, this report comes on the back of sustained riots over, 6 days in the province?
It does, Andrew, and it's very sad reading because really what is at the heels of this is they are putting undocumented immigrants into areas of high deprivation. There is a group here called Mears. 85% of their properties are in socially deprived areas, and those areas are now kicking back because in amongst those areas you have pensioners and so forth that have bought their houses back in the 80s. I spoke to a couple of them that were having to be moved out by their grandchildren, put a Union Jack in the window because they were fearful of their properties being burned out. But also in these areas are illegal activities from migrants that have came there. In that particular street in Ballymena, there were 2 brothels. People could have possibly been trafficked into those areas. And the amount of young women not going out in the town is completely insane because at nights they're coming back down through the town and being harassed by migrants that are asking them to come with them and following them the whole way down the town. So the pub trade is suffering because of this. The economy of the areas are suffering because of this. And the areas, no harm to anyone, are absolutely filthy and costing the ratepayers of not just Ballymena a lot of money to get rubbish cleared up off the streets, never mind the rats and vermin that are going through it. And these are all things that are not being reported by what we would call mainstream media. And this has built up into an absolute powder keg that basically exploded in Ballymena last week. They then took those migrants out of there and placed them into a town 30 miles away in Larne, into a leisure centre, as a sort of an iPass centre, a help centre for them. The people that shouldn't have found out about it on the Tuesday, not the Wednesday as has been reported, and on the Wednesday the leisure centre was burnt. Then word came through that these migrants were going to Portadown, which is miles away from Ballymena. And over on Thursday and Friday night, I seen 2 riots that were absolutely vicious, totally vicious. And what we have is failed policy from in behind here. People saying that they're racist right-wing thugs. The police coming out and saying the same. The police budget's being stretched. Officers are going to be hurt, and young people are being arrested because of failed government policy.
Fascinating, Doogie. Thank you so much.
Well, let's talk to the director and founder of the polling company behind this, Scarlett Maguire. Scarlett, morning and welcome to you. By the way, before we talk about this report, congratulations, because this is the first report, I think, by your new company, Merlin Strategy.
Oh, thank you very much, Andrew. That's very kind.
You are a rare voice in the world of polling because, if I may say so, having written about polling companies for years, very few polling representatives are women.
Oh, yeah.
So well done and keep up the good work.
It's actually quite unusual, surprisingly so. But yes, I'm a woman.
It is. And so what have you found then, Scarlett, in this fascinating poll about how people feel about the UK?
Look, this poll was fascinating, but it was also actually quite depressing. So we found a British public that overwhelmingly thought that Britain is in decline, that Britain is already broken. And astonishingly, and I think the bit that caught a lot of people's attention, was that 3 in 4 people are worried about the potential for political violence in the country. Now, I do want to caveat this. This is just a poll of GB, because no doubt if you poll people in Northern Ireland, they'd be thinking about the violence that's already happening there. But we were just polling Great Britain.
And Scarlett, what is underlying it? We know what happened in Northern Ireland was to do with the effects of rapid mass migration. Is that a major factor today in why people see it we're in decline and also fear the outbreak of violence? Because we saw what happened in Southport was earlier this year.
So I think the backdrop to these sorts of concerns is quite nuanced and quite complicated, but you can definitely point to parts of the running of the country that we know that people are not happy with. I think first thing to say is that people are worried about their living standards. They think they've declined. And actually, strikingly, in a different part of the survey, we found that 4 in 10 people feel like they were worse off since the COVID pandemic. That was actually particularly pronounced amongst reform voters. But overall, people are very pessimistic about their personal finances and their cost of living. So I think that's a huge driver. We also know that people aren't happy with the government's handling of immigration. And actually going back to that question about what's affecting people's living standards, which I think is a much better way of getting at how people are feeling about things like the economy, people perceive, including Labour voters, including a sizable chunk of Labour voters, that immigration has had a negative impact on their living standards. And I do think we're starting to see that filter through into pessimism about the country as a whole.
Where does the fear of the violence come from, though, Scarlett?
The fear of the violence, I think we didn't ask specifically where the fear of the violence came from, but you get a sense from the rest of the questions that we asked about what is provoking people's, what is underlying their sense of misery. And again, I think it comes back to their top concerns facing the country. That is a concern that the economy is not doing well for them, a concern about levels of migration, and a concern about the state of public services. And I think when you factor those together, you come up with quite an unhappy population. I think that's where the concern is, because I think people out there can tell that other people are not very happy.
And interesting that the younger people, particularly, Scarlett, feel they can't afford the house that they want and they will have a worse standard of living than their parents. That's a very, very damning indictment on any society.
It is a damning indictment, and I think it feeds into the sense that the country is broken. And why that's important is not just because young people feel that way. It's hugely important that young people feel that way. And I think a lot of people reading some of those statistics would be very shocked. And actually, we looked into things like the amount of young people using buy now, pay later services to meet everyday costs, about young people skipping meals, and all of those findings were deeply shocking. But it also matters for parents. I've done lots of focus groups with people in actually pretty wealthy areas, outside London in commuter belts. And they think the country is broken because their grown-up children, their children in their early 20s that they thought were going to have at least as good a life of them, if not better, are stuck at home. And I think that is feeding into the sense that the country is not working very well for its citizens.
Yeah. Brilliant, brilliant as always. Thank you so much, Scarlett Maguire there from Merlin Polling.
I'm not surprised, are you?
No, not at all surprised.
And
not at all surprised.
Cost of living and
Yep.
services disintegrating, and a factor in all of that is the effect of mass immigration.
And huge inflation as well. And you feel like the politicians have just got the fingers in their ears going, la, 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 not listening. We're just carrying on as we are. Same old, same old.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.